Today I'm out in Michigan taking a look at the all-new Chevy Traverse. This is a brand new vehicle for 2024, and it definitely has a different personality than the outgoing model. The outgoing Traverse was sometimes lampooned as the minivan crossover, and that is certainly not what's going on with the new 2024 Traverse. They've borrowed an awful lot of the design from the larger body-on-frame Chevy Tahoe, and they've added a great deal of additional capability. But let's talk about the design first. This is the RS trim, so this is the sportiest interpretation of the Traverse look. We have the divorced headlamp thing going on here with the LED headlights down here at the bottom, the accent lights right there on top, RS badging, lots of gloss black. I really like the red paint on this one. You'll notice that the front end design is certainly boxier and more upright than before. Dimensionally, the Traverse is about the same size as the outgoing model, although Chevy has not given us any final dimensions. And it's worth noting that we don't have any final legroom or headroom figures either. That's all coming along with the price tag of the new Traverse. But they have said this is going to be roughly the same exterior dimensions and likely the same interior dimensions as the existing model. So certainly on the larger side of the three-row crossover segment. And with the RS trim, probably on the sportier side as well, we now get 275 with 22-inch wheels and tires. Also a big change for 2024 is the new Z71 trim. This borrows a lot of the styling cues from the Chevy Tahoe and adds a great deal of capability as far as off-road ability for the Traverse lineup. You'll notice right away that we have these big red recovery hooks down at the bottom, and Chevy says they are fully functional. Under here, we also have a skid plate for the first time in the Chevy Traverse. And then we get slightly more aggressive approach angles thanks to a redesigned lower bumper. The rest of the front end design is very similar to the RS trim that was over there on that side. Same LED headlights, same LED accents. Interestingly enough, LEDs are going to be standard across the lineup, and that really seems to be a theme actually for the Traverse, is lots and lots of standard equipment. As you'd expect in an off-road trim, we get black fender flares here, we get all-terrain tires. These are Goodyear Wrangler all-terrain tires in an 18-inch size. A little bit more black accents instead of the shiny accents that we found on the RS trim. The squareness of the design has really been accentuated out back with all new LED taillights. These are full LEDs, but there's an interesting twist. If you get the RS trim, then when the lights are off, this has more of a clear frosted look, and the rest of the lineup has red tail lamps that are always going to be red even when the lights are off. Quad exhaust tips are now going to be standard on every Traverse trim. So if you get the base LS trim, you don't have fake exhaust tips at the back. It's kind of an interesting twist. 5,000 pounds of towing capability is going to be standard. Now, let me know what you think about this design cue right back here with this really swoopy rear window for the third row area. The actual visible part for the third row passengers, we'll take a look at this in a bit, is kind of triangular right here in the middle. It definitely gives this a boxier, more rugged look with this wing or sail panel that pops up right there. But I think it does cut down rearward visibility a little bit versus the outgoing Chevy Traverse that did seem to have a slightly larger window in the rear. Under the hood, there's a big change. Instead of the 3.6-liter V6, we find an all-new 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine. It's based on GM's global engine family, so relatively related to the 2.7-liter turbo we find in their truck lineup. This is going to produce 315 horsepower, 317 pound-feet of torque. This is now one of the most powerful entries in this segment, aside from some of the new hybrids that we find from Toyota. We don't have any performance figures yet, but this is likely going to be one of the quickest 0 to 60 as long as curb weight is kept in check. Sending power to the ground is a new 8-speed automatic transmission instead of the 9-speed. Chevy says that this 8-speed is just better suited to the vehicle, generally speaking, and they've readjusted the gear ratios and the final drive ratio for better performance. Now, speaking of performance, the RS trim is of course going to have a regular all-wheel drive system, but this Z71 over here is going to have a unique all-wheel drive system. They've borrowed the twin-clutch rear axle unit from some of their other vehicles, and that's going to give this the ability to basically have a limited slip differential in the rear or torque vectoring axle in the rear, depending on the situation required. So it can send up to 50% of engine power to the rear without wheel slip, and then it can direct that entire power sent to the rear axle across to a single rear wheel. That's really going to help out when it comes to off-roading adventures. I am a little surprised, though, that the RS trim doesn't get the exact same twin-clutch all-wheel drive system because it likely has some dynamic benefits out on windier roads. Another long-standing reason to buy the Traverse over the competition has been its cargo area. It's been one of the biggest in the segment. Unfortunately, at this point in time, I don't know whether this will be the biggest, but it's definitely in contention. You can see that we have a lot of room back here behind the third row seats and a surprising amount of room under this cargo area lid. Now, if you're worried that Chevy has skimped on a spare tire because of this, fear not, there is actually a spare tire under this cargo divider there. It does look to be an easily wash-outable cargo divider as well. So if you have sandy items or dirty items, etc., you want to toss them there under the load floor, you can then pull that plastic section out and rinse it separately. Of course, we have a power hatch, and the other thing you'll notice is that the hatch area is very vertical in this generation of Traverse, really helping improve that cargo practicality. Now, they have said that this is going to have best-in-class cargo capacity from the back all the way up here to the first row seats. So that should give you some idea about how big the interior is. In addition to being the sporty and rugged entry in this large three-row crossover segment, Chevy also wants this to be the luxurious entry. So we find some features in here you just don't find in most of the competition, like four-way adjustable lumbar support, an identical passenger seat with four-way lumbar, and a powered memory-link tilt telescopic steering column. But Chevy hasn't forgotten family friendliness. This is going to be one of the very few three-row crossovers that will let you get into the third row with a child seat latch anchored into place. It's an electric release mechanism, and you can see this seat flips forward without changing the angle of the seat back. You can, of course, fold the seat forward if you'd rather do that. So you have the choice of how you want to get back there into the third row. Now, speaking of seating, you'll be able to get this in either a 7-passenger or an 8-passenger model. The base trim is going to be 8-passenger only. The next trim up is your choice of 7 or 8, and then the rest of the lineup is 7-seat exclusive. The other thing I definitely noticed, even though I've only had a very short amount of time in the Traverse, is that the second row captain's chairs are a little bit wider and more padded than average. These do feel a bit more comfortable than the Buick Enclave that we drove in here on. Now let's check out the third row, obviously the entire reason to buy a big three-row vehicle like the Traverse. Back here we find one of the better three rows in this segment. I do think that the Grand Highlander's third row seat cushion seems to be a little bit higher off the ground, although without official specifications, it's really difficult to comment at this moment. Headroom, however, very generous. I have about 2 inches of headroom back here because Chevy has really sculpted the ceiling to maximize headroom for the third row. We also have air vents up here in the ceiling. They're a bit more of a traditional design, but it means it's going to be easier to direct air around, especially at your face if you like that back here in the third row. That does help seem to prevent motion sickness. Now, speaking of motion sickness, we do have this very triangular window back here and a fairly large pillar in this area. That's where the seatbelt for the second row comes out of. This does seem to be a little bit tighter than the current generation Traverse. I'm a little bit surprised about that. Back here for the third row passengers, we get some cup holders, USB-C charge points, and this is a 3-person bench in the back. The shoulder belt for this position comes out of the ceiling. These are power folding third row seats in this model. Here's a better look at those air vents in the third row. You can see that they're definitely pointing at the third row passengers' faces, as well as the cutout in the ceiling to help improve third row headroom. Now let's look at the interior of the RS. This is the top end trim, so of course we have features like this big panoramic moonroof. This is one of the largest panoramic moonroofs that Chevy has ever given us, and the front section does open. We also get a very slim border between the front pane and the second pane. Air vents up there in the ceiling for the second row passenger seats, and this gives you an idea of exactly how that second row seat collapses when you have a child seat latch anchored into place. Don't worry, it won't actually move that way if a child is in the seat because it does have sort of a weight balance. It's not just going to pop forward or anything. Up front, we have height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger. The RS emblem embossed on those headrests, obviously contrasting stitching. The leather upholstery is perforated, but these seats are not ventilated, they're just heated, unlike you'll find on some of the competition. Moving over to the front doors, there's a reasonable amount of soft touch material, although clearly harder plastics are found down there at the bottom of the door to help improve durability. It's a little bit tricky to see, but the trim actually fades from red to a dark red or black over there, thanks to those black cross hatches in the design. Moving over to the dashboard, we have significantly improved materials versus the last generation Traverse. Lots of soft touch things going on up top on the dashboard. We have a reasonably sized bin-style glove compartment. You'd have no problem fitting an 11-inch tablet computer inside, but that tablet computer is going to be way smaller than this nearly 18-inch touchscreen that is going to be standard on all Traverse trims. I think we have finally hit peak screen in the crossover segment. Let's take a closer look. Over here we have a power button on top. We have this volume knob that is actually on top of the screen. You can actually see how the screen responds to that volume knob being rotated around. Headlight control, that's over here. That's a pretty recent Chevy thing to put the headlight control in the infotainment software. this is running the same generation of the software that we find in a wide variety of GM's new products. So lots of touchscreen features there, lots of camera angles. We also have, of course, smartphone integration in the vehicle as well. Then on the driver's side, we have an approximately 11-inch instrument cluster. Unfortunately, I can't start the car, so I can't show you exactly what that looks like. But I can show you what the steering wheel looks like, because this is going to have Super Cruise. This is going to be one of the first Chevy products to offer that feature. Of course, we had it in the Bolt EUV first. Here we have part of the driver monitoring system. This is the status light for Super Cruise. We have a new steering wheel design over here where the controls for the cruise control system. You'll notice we have an L button over there that appears to be part of the shifter, because of course we have a digital shifter over there. It's sort of this stock style shifter like we find on the Cadillac Lyriq rather than a console shifter. Infotainment controls over there on that side, along with a heated steering wheel button. That frees up a lot of space over here in the center console. So we have the engine start stop button there, big storage cubby with USB charge ports, controls for the dual zone automatic climate control, big cup holders there. Under this area, lots of additional storage space. This has a nearly flat floor across the front, kind of like an EV. More storage under that little cubby. You can see it has the general Chevy key that we've seen for a while under that area. Then we have the armrest, and then more additional storage space inside. That's a pretty deep storage well. You could probably fit a gallon of milk in there easily. Fortunately, I was able to take a look at the other Chevy Traverse and turn on its LCD instrument cluster. Here's what it looks like. There are a number of different layouts that you can choose from. This actually reminds me a great deal of Cadillac's LCD instrument cluster lineup, so certainly more configurable and I think more elegant animations than we find currently in the Hyundai and Kia lineup. And Hyundai and Kia are probably the most aggressive outside of this new Traverse when it comes to their big two-screen setup in the dashboard, but this one is certainly a lot bigger than you'll find in anything else. Unfortunately, at this point in time, one of the things I don't know is how much the Traverse is going to cost, but it's likely going to start somewhere around $35,000 to $37,000. The existing Traverse starts right there around the $35,000 mark. You could expect that the Traverse, with all the added features, the turbocharged engine, the new transmission, the big screen on the inside, full LED taillights and headlights, etc., is going to be more expensive than the existing model. I'm really intrigued to drive especially the RS trim. I also can't wait to see some of the specifications on the base model, because we have really wide tires on this RS. Even the Z71 has 265 width tires. Outside of something like a Dodge Durango SRT, this is about as wide of a tire as you'll find in the large three-row segment, so handling is probably going to be among the best. And that's something that we've seen in a number of recent Chevy crossovers, from the Chevy Trax all the way up here to the Chevy Traverse now. Especially let us know what you think of the mini Tahoe looks of the new Chevy Traverse, and of course stay tuned, because hopefully I will be driving this before it goes on sale in 2024. See all of you next week.